Part 12. I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 111. Master, that's the death abyss of the demon race. The voice of the fire phoenix came. Hearing this voice, Chen Hao, who was sitting on the head of the fire phoenix, stood up. He looked into the distance. Chen Hao's eyes were filled with a hint of surprise. In front of him, there was a black mist. This black mist covered the land in front like the morning fog. At the same time, Chen Hao could see the source of the mist, which came from a huge crack in the ground in the distance. This crack was very wide, with a width of more than hundreds of meters, and the length could not see the end of the crack on both sides. Chen Hao was riding on the top of the fire phoenix, flying in the sky, so he could see the width of the crack. If he stood below, he would not be able to see the width of the crack at all, because the crack was too wide. From the endless crack, or should I say, the death abyss overflowed with black mist. These black mists were like backflowing water, pouring out of the death abyss and then spreading around. The black mist dyed everything below black, including the sky. No wonder this place is always dark and you can't see the sky. It turns out that the black mist all comes from here. These should be magic elements. Normal magic elements should be invisible to the naked eye, but the magic elements here can be seen by the naked eye. It's really terrifying. Chen Hao muttered. This place is full of the breath of death. Huo Feng said, guys like King Lu are most repelled by this kind of breath. Chen Hao looked at the black mist that permeated from the abyss of death, and looked at the dark world in front of him. What Chen Hao could smell at this moment was a smell of corruption, which didn't smell good. Seeing this scene, Chen Hao thought of what he had told King Lu at that time, asking King Lu to turn this place into a forest. It seems that he underestimated this place. At this moment, Chen Hao could feel the endless breath of death. Even if King Lu was a strange beast, it would be difficult for it to change the situation here. Chen Hao looked down. On both sides of the abyss, you can see the dark earth and the black magic element everywhere. Suddenly, Chen Hao's eyes were filled with surprise. What is that? Chen Hao found some white things on the edge of the abyss, and those things were still moving. Because the distance was a bit far now, and the black fog covered it, Chen Hao could only vaguely see that there were things. When the fire phoenix heard it, it said, it's some low-level undead creatures. Ah, Chen Hao was stunned, and there was a trace of doubt in his eyes. Undead creatures. Yes, the fire phoenix said, yes. As the fire phoenix approached, the fire it produced illuminated the surroundings, and the black fog was also dispersed a little because of the arrival of the fire phoenix. With the fire created by the fire phoenix, Chen Hao saw the appearance of those things clearly. That is, the moment Chen Hao saw the appearance of that thing, his eyes lit up. As a game nerd who plays games besides work, the creature in front of him made Chen Hao feel that his blood was burning. Skeleton man, Chen Hao's eyes lit up, and a smile appeared on his face. He thought, this world actually has the veteran of online games, the skeleton man. What Chen Hao saw was a white creature on the edge of the abyss of death. It was the skeleton man, whose body was made of skeletons, clean and without clothes, only a skeleton man. Next to the skeleton man, there was a group of skeleton men who looked similar. The fire phoenix flew in the air, hovering, waiting for Chen Hao's next order. Hearing Chen Hao's words, Huo Feng was a little confused. Master, are you excited? Chen Hao was stunned, and he laughed. It's okay, these creatures, are they skeletons? Huo Feng hummed, yes, this death abyss was a flat place 50,000 years ago, but there was a world war here 50,000 years ago, and the main battlefield of the war was here. This death abyss was bombed during the battle. Humans, demons, elves, dragons, orcs, etc. all died here. Later, rich dark magic overflowed from the death abyss. Those corpses absorbed the dark magic and turned into the monsters you see now. These monsters cannot be killed by ordinary means. After they are destroyed, their bodies will be repaired by dark magic and can be restored in a very short time. Hearing this, Chen Hao stretched his eyebrows. This setting is very similar to the games he played in his previous life. Swoosh, suddenly, a sound came. Chen Hao saw a wooden arrow shot up from below, gliding through the air, and then falling down quickly. Seeing this, Chen Hao looked at the guys below. Chen Hao's sight fell on one of the skeleton archers who was holding a longbow and carrying a quiver, and was using the longbow to aim at this side. While Chen Hao and the Fire Phoenix were talking, the dark monsters below had already discovered them. The skeleton man stared at this side and roared, "Ah!" The skeleton archer took a long arrow and shot at this side. However, the Fire Phoenix flew very high. This wooden arrow could not hook the Fire Phoenix at all, and it was completely useless. Humph! The Fire Phoenix curled its lips in disdain, and it said, "Others can't kill you, but it doesn't mean that I can't kill you." As the voice fell, the Fire Phoenix flapped its wings. 6 or 7 fireballs fell from the sky. Accompanied by scorching air waves and flames, it blasted the group of dark monsters below. Boom 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 boom. Accompanied by loud noises and scorching air waves. The skeletons in the middle of the fireball were blasted to pieces, and some skeletons outside the fireball were affected by the air waves generated by the explosion of the fireball and were also shattered by the air waves. In the blink of an eye, a large area below was left with the burning land that was almost melted and some broken skeletons on the periphery. Huo Feng said, "Master, these guys are located on the edge of the Death Abyss. They are the weakest dark monsters in the Death Abyss. The magic crystals are very small and weak. If the master wants magic crystals, we have to fly down." Hearing this, Chen Hao smiled and said, "Wait a minute." Chen Hao took out the life detector, pressed the button, and then pointed it at the skeletons below. Chen Hao was quite interested in this kind of dark monster. In the online games of his previous life, Chen Hao played some interesting games. He also chose professions such as the undead mage, summoning a bunch of skeletons. If possible, Chen Hao would like to get a few to play with. However, these are monsters. Monsters can only be tamed when they are young. If they are already mature, then it won't work. Mature skeleton. Skeleton, a dark attribute monster, becomes a monster when the dead human corpse is invaded by dark magic. Mature. Does that mean it won't work? What a pity, Chen Hao muttered. Suddenly, Chen Hao seemed to notice something, and he looked down subconsciously. With the light emitted by the Fire Phoenix, Chen Hao could see that next to the group of skeletons, there was another more eye-catching skeleton. This skeleton was less than 1 meter tall and very small, just like a child. Seeing this, Chen Hao was slightly startled. "This is..." He pointed the screen of the biometric detector at the little skeleton. Words appeared on the biological identification device screen. Cub stage Little Skeleton Man. Little Skeleton Man, a dark attribute monster, is formed by the human corpse being invaded by dark magic and transformed into a monster. Since the corpse has less magic, its body size is smaller. Seeing this, Chen Hao's eyes suddenly lit up and he smiled, "Yo. Hee. I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world." Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 112. Book. The book appeared in front of Chen Hao. Chen Hao turned the pages and took out the trap rope card from the pages. His eyes fell on the little skeleton man below. He waved his hand. The card flew out. Transform. The card turned into a rope and flew out quickly, sweeping towards the little skeleton man. In an instant, the rope tied up the little skeleton man's body. It was tied up like a dumpling, tightly. Suddenly, the little skeleton and the trap rope disappeared at the same time. 2 cards appeared in front of Chen Hao. Chen Hao stretched out his hand, put away the trap rope card, and looked at another card. Cub stage Little Skeleton Man. Taming degree, 0. The growth path of the little skeleton man rightward arrow young skeleton man. Chen Hao held this monster card and looked at the skeleton man on the card pattern. He smiled expectantly. I wonder what this little guy will grow into in the future. Although there is expectation, it takes time to wait. Next, let's get some magic crystals first. Chen Hao retracted his gaze and looked at the Fire Phoenix. Fire Phoenix, you just said that the edge of the abyss is full of weak dark monsters, which means that we need to enter the abyss. Yes, Master Fire Phoenix said, we need to enter the abyss. There are many powerful dark monsters in the death abyss. Hearing this, Chen Hao nodded slightly, then let's go. When the Fire Phoenix heard it, it hummed, it flapped its huge wings, and the flames illuminated the sky with red light, and it flew towards the huge crack. The body of the Fire Phoenix is already large enough, but when the Fire Phoenix approaches this huge abyss crack, Chen Hao realized what it meant to be even larger. The abyss crack is too wide and too big. Even the huge body of the Fire Phoenix, which seemed to be able to cover the sky and the sun, was particularly obvious in front of this crack in the death abyss. The fire produced by the Fire Phoenix illuminated the wall of the abyss next to it. Chen Hao looked down and found that it was pitch black below. Countless black mists were surging out, and these mists were blocked by the fire on the Fire Phoenix. No mist could get within 10 meters of the Fire Phoenix. But below, it's so deep, Chen Hao murmured. The Fire Phoenix dived directly down, which was fast enough, but it flew for several minutes and still didn't reach the bottom. However, Chen Hao found that the cliffs on both sides, which were relatively close before, separated from each other as time went by, and gradually, the fire of the Fire Phoenix did not illuminate the cliff on the opposite side. In other words, the space below was slowly expanding with the passage of depth. For Chen Hao, who had no knowledge of wood and earth, he was a little confused. If the space below was larger than the crack space above, wouldn't it collapse directly? However, looking at the black fog surging upwards, Chen Hao realized that it was a mistake to analyze this world with the common sense of his previous life. He flew for about 20 minutes. Chen Hao could see the ground below through the firelight. "We're here," Chen Hao whispered in his heart. The Fire Phoenix flapped its huge wings and slowly landed on the ground. When the Fire Phoenix landed, the Fire Phoenix's body lit up. Chen Hao was startled and looked at the Fire Phoenix below. Chen Hao found that his body became lighter, and a red transparent cover wrapped Chen Hao's body. Chen Hao stepped on the transparent spherical cover and was sent flying down by the cover. Chen Hao's body fell to the ground, and the transparent cover with red light still covered Chen Hao's body. Chen Hao looked at the Fire Phoenix, but found that the Fire Phoenix's body shrank. In the blink of an eye, the Fire Phoenix's body turned back into human form. The Fire Phoenix looked at Chen Hao, and a smile appeared on its face. "Master, it feels great to ride on me, but I still feel uncomfortable when I can't see you. Now that I can see you, I feel much more comfortable." Chen Hao smiled. He retracted his sight and looked around. Both Chen Hao and the Fire Phoenix were wrapped in a light shield made of fire magic by the Fire Phoenix. The light emitted by this light shield can illuminate the surrounding environment. But the distance that this light source can illuminate is limited. A little further away, it is still dark and the vision is blocked. This is no wonder, after all, this is inside the abyss. "Master," suddenly, a voice came from Chen Hao's shoulder. Chen Hao came back to his senses and looked at Xiaoying beside him. Xiaoying stared at the front with his eyes narrowed, and his eyes were threatening. "Over there are creatures approaching." Hearing this, Chen Hao looked in the direction that Xiaoying was looking at. Suddenly, in the darkness in the distance, a green light appeared. Seeing the green light, Chen Hao was slightly startled. "Is it a ghost fire?" "It's not a ghost fire." Huo Feng waved her hand. 3 flames flew out. The flames flew into the air and hovered in the air in a triangular position. The flames illuminated a wider field of vision. With the help of the field of vision opened by the flames, Chen Hao saw the true face of the green fire in front. This is... Chen Hao's eyes were full of novelty. I saw a skull that was 2 meters high, surrounded by dark green flames, flying in the air half a meter above the ground. Red light could be seen in its empty pupils. That seemed to be its eyes, and it was staring at this side. Chen Hao pressed the life detector in his hand, and the life detector projected a picture, aiming at the strange creature. Identifying. Identification completed. The target is, Beast King Burning Skull. Burning Skull, a dark monster, is a monster that gained life from the skull being eroded by a large number of dark monsters. It has a unique dark magic, dark fire. Seeing this, Chen Hao stretched his eyebrows. It is a monster in the Beast King period. The red light in the pupil of the burning skull flashed. A ball of green fire condensed and rushed towards Chen Hao. Suddenly, a wall of fire lit up 10 meters away from Chen Hao. Bang! The green fireball hit the wall of fire and dissipated directly. Chen Hao looked at it and looked at the fire phoenix. I saw that the fire phoenix's always warm smile was as cold as frost at this moment. It stared at the burning skull. You're courting death by touching my master in front of me. The fire phoenix raised its hand. The ground directly below the burning skull suddenly lit up with a red light. Boom! A red pillar of fire with a diameter of 3 meters rushed out of the ground and hit the burning skull. Ah! The burning skull screamed, and its entire head was wrapped in the red pillar of fire. In the blink of an eye, its entire body was swallowed by the burning pillar of fire. The pillar of fire rushed straight into the sky, with a height of tens of meters. With the appearance of the pillar of fire, Chen Hao could feel a wave of air coming towards him, stirring up a burning breath. The heat and fire generated by the pillar of fire illuminated the surroundings. The hot air wave stirred up a strong wind, blowing Chen Hao's clothes. Chen Hao's eyebrows stretched slightly. The pillar of fire dissipated, and the burning skull just now was now reduced to nothing. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 113. Humph, I don't know whether to live or die, Huofeng said indifferently. It adjusted its mood and then looked at Chen Hao. Its angry face immediately changed to another smiling face. It looked at Chen Hao with a smile on its face. Master, are you okay? Hearing this, Chen Hao looked at the ground that turned into lava and nodded slightly. It's okay. This guy, a little beast king, doesn't know whether to live or die. He actually dares to attack you, the master, in front of me. I'm really tired of living, Huofeng snorted. Chen Hao looked at Huofeng. However, Huofeng, killing the enemy is a good thing, but, next time you attack, remember to keep the magic crystal. The fire phoenix was startled, then it came to its senses, then looked at Chen Hao, showing an awkward smile. I just accidentally forgot. Hearing this, Chen Hao smiled. It's okay. Fire Phoenix is a bit heavy-handed, so he needs to find some monsters that are lighter-handed and can help collect magic crystals quickly. Thinking of this, Chen Hao raised his eyebrows. That's right. Chen Hao opened the book and took out 5 cards from the book. He waved his hand and the card flew out. Change. The card disappeared out of thin air and turned into 5 shadow magic rabbits. 5 shadow magic rabbits stood on the ground, and the 5 little guys looked around. After Rabbit Yi looked around, he murmured, "What a strong dark magic element scent." Its 4 ears stood up, and its expression showed a hint of joy. The shadow rabbit itself has dark attributes, and it obviously likes the dark attribute magic elements that exist everywhere. As soon as the rabbit came to his senses, it looked at Chen Hao and said, "Master." Noticed Xiaoying sitting on Chen Hao's shoulder. Rabbit Yi was slightly startled, with joy on his face. "Sister Xiaoying." Xiaoying nodded slightly and said nothing. Hearing this, Chen Hao said, "Tu Yi, the five of you will deal with the monsters or monsters below the awakening stage in a while, and collect the magic crystals." When the rabbit heard it, he immediately said, "Okay." Chen Hao withdrew his gaze, looked forward, and walked forward. The place was dark and the air was a bit cold. However, Chen Hao had a human-shaped stove as big as Huofeng beside him, and Huofeng used fire magic to light 3 fireballs as lighting tools, so he was not afraid of the dark, let alone the cold. Now Chen Hao has a novelty about this place. Everything here is very novel. Whether it's skeletors, skeleton archers, or the burning skull that just popped up, it's all fun. This reminded Chen Hao of the time when he squatted at home and played Western online games. It felt very special. At the same time, Chen Hao is now thinking that it might be interesting to collect some dark monsters. Suddenly, a voice came. By the light of the fire, Chen Hao saw what the thing looked like. Directly in front, a 2-meter tall skeleton creature wearing black armor and holding an old giant axe was standing there. Through the worn-out helmet, Chen Hao discovered that the skeleton was not a human skeleton, because the skull creature had 2 horns on its head, and the head and body looked like a cow walking upright. There was novelty in Chen Hao's eyes. Huofeng explained, "It's the bull-headed skeleton king." After hearing this, Chen Hao picked up the biological identification device and looked at it. Beast King Stage Bull-Headed Skeleton King. The Bull-Headed Skeleton King, a dark attribute monster, is a monster formed by the invasion of dark magic elements from the dead skeletons of the Oxmen warriors of the Orc clan. It has powerful destructive power. Well. Chen Hao muttered, "Rookie." Roar, the bull-headed skeleton king noticed Chen Hao. It seemed to understand Chen Hao's words. It was humiliated and roared, holding a worn-out axe and rushing towards Chen Hao. At this time, the rabbit moved. "I saw Rabbit Yi," his body moved, his small body appeared in front of the bull-headed skeleton king, and its pair of paws that were not proportional to the body waved forward. 6 black claws that were 5 meters long swept across the body of the bull-headed skeleton king. Boom! Accompanied by a muffled sound. The figure of the bull-headed skeleton king shattered in response. Its body turned into countless broken bones and fell to the ground. Pa bang bang. Listening to this voice, Yosagi moved quickly, holding the skull of the bull-headed skeleton king in his hand, and clenched his paws fiercely. Bang, the skull shattered. There is an extra Beast King stage magic crystal in Tuyi's hand. Tuyi is the Shadow Demon Rabbit, and the Shadow Demon Rabbit is a magical beast in the awakening stage. Among the dark monsters, the Shadow Demon Rabbit's combat ability is top-notch. For a bull-headed skeleton king in the Beast King stage, the result can only be an instant kill. The Shadow Rabbit moved slightly and came to Chen Hao. It stretched out its hand and handed the magic crystal to Chen Hao, "Master." When Chen Hao saw this, he smiled and stretched out his hand to take it. Change. The magic crystal turns into a card. Beast King Magic Crystal, the magic crystal of the bull-headed skeleton king, with dark attributes. When Chen Hao saw this, he smiled, "It's interesting." He placed the card into the book. When Chen Hao put the cards into the book, he heard movement. Crack. The sound was like the sound of a hard object moving and then touching the ground. Hearing the sound, Chen Hao looked at the source of the sound. I saw that the broken bones of the bull-headed skeleton king began to move. Seeing this, Chen Hao was slightly startled. "The magic crystal is gone, can you still live?" "Yes," Huofeng explained, "as long as there is dark magic element here, these things will not die. Unless you burn these things directly into dregs like me, they will not be able to be resurrected." Chen Hao stretched his eyebrows and looked at the bones curiously. The bones began to reorganize under the pull of the dark magic element. But when these bones were reorganized, Chen Hao was stunned for a moment when the bull-headed skeleton king emerged. The bull-headed skeleton king just now was 2 meters tall. The reorganized bull-headed skeleton king in front of him was less than 1 meter tall, and he also lost his armor and weapons. It looks like a smooth bull-headed skull. This is... Chen Hao looked at Huo Feng. Huo Feng said, after losing the magic crystal, its strength will be greatly reduced. Is the strength greatly reduced? But is this change too big? Chen Hao's heart moved, and he seemed to have thought of something. He used the life identification device on this thing again. Identifying. Authentication completed. Incubation stage. Calf-headed skeleton. The calf-headed skeleton, a dark monster, is a monster formed from the dead skeletons of the Bullman tribe's warriors from the Orc tribe, which were invaded by dark magic elements. Since it absorbs less dark magic, it is smaller in size. When Chen Hao saw this, his eyes widened. Chen Hao looked at the bull-headed skeleton in front of him. After being destroyed, the dark monster is resurrected? Is it equivalent to being reborn? It has directly degenerated from the Beast King stage into a baby? After Chen Hao came to his senses, his face suddenly showed the smile of a miser who saw the golden mountain. Ha ha! Chen Hao smiled. Chen Hao's smile made the fire phoenix stunned for a moment, and it subconsciously looked at Chen Hao. The bull-headed skeleton man was obviously not afraid of death. It rushed towards Chen Hao. Chen Hao adjusted his excitement, and took out the animal trapping rope card, transform. The animal trap turns into a rope and flies towards the calf-headed skeleton. In an instant, the calf-headed skeleton was tied up. Turned into cards. Chen Hao looked at the calf-headed skeleton card in front of him and smiled happily. It's cool, it's so cool. I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 114. Chen Hao put away the cards and put them into the book. Chen Hao's face was full of smiles. Let's go. Chen Hao took Huo Feng and the others and continued to walk inside. On the way, they met several bull-headed skeleton warriors and 1 or 2 bull-headed skeleton kings. Bull-headed skeleton warriors are actually mature monsters evolved from small bull-headed skeleton people. Chen Hao doesn't like repeated things, so he just let them go. As for the method of letting them go, it is to let Tu Yi turn them into magic crystals, and then let Huo Feng add fuel to the fire. Walking along the way. Not long after, Chen Hao encountered another unique creature. Snake bones. Chen Hao looked at the snake-like creature in front of him, which was more than 10 meters long and could lift its head 6 or 7 meters off the ground. This creature was like a giant snake without flesh and blood. Chen Hao used the life detector to identify it. Awakening period. Skeleton python. Skeleton python, a monster transformed from the corpse of a dead giant python that absorbed a large amount of magic elements, has powerful dark magic. See the description of the identifier. Chen Hao stretched his eyebrows. Awakening stage, then it's still a rookie. Rabbit moved. All of a sudden, the head of the skeleton python was removed. The magic crystal was taken out directly by Rabbit. For the shadow magic rabbit, no one in the awakening stage can be its opponent. The skeleton python is no exception. Chen Hao put away the magic crystal, and he saw that the pile of corpses of the skeleton python turned into more than 10 small snake-shaped monsters, and they ran towards the side. Chen Hao noticed that the fire phoenix was about to raise his hand. He hurriedly said, "Fire Phoenix, leave one." Fire Phoenix heard it, it nodded slightly, and waved its white hand. The fire lighted up. The flames passed, and more than 10 snake-shaped monsters, only one was left. Chen Hao took out the trap rope card and waved his hand. The card flew out. Transform. Soon. Chen Hao had an extra monster card in his hand. Cub stage small bone snake. Seeing this, Chen Hao smiled. This death abyss is really a good place. The monsters killed by oneself can be reborn as cubs. Such a wonderful place is really rare. Chen Hao continued to walk in with the fire phoenix. Chen Hao did not want similar monsters, he only wanted creatures of different types. Killed all the way. As time went by, Chen Hao found that the realms of the monsters he encountered along the way were getting higher and higher. From the mature stage outside the abyss at the beginning, then the Beast King stage of the bull-headed Skeleton King, and then the awakening stage of the Skeleton Python. At the same time, Chen Hao also found that the black fog around him was getting thicker and thicker. Of course, with the fire phoenix, these thick fogs could not get within 10 meters of Chen Hao. Keep going in, I guess I will encounter more powerful dark monsters, Chen Hao muttered. Roar, suddenly, a roar sounded. Hearing this roar, Chen Hao's heart moved. A gleam of light flashed across his eyes. Is this the roar of a dragon? Chen Hao looked at Huo Feng. Is there a giant dragon here? Huo Feng smiled. Of course there is, that kind of thing, as long as there is a rich magic element, there will be. However, the giant dragon in the Death Abyss is a little unique. Unique? Chen Hao was puzzled. Huo Feng smiled and said, it found us and is coming to us. You will know it in a while, master, he. Looking at Huo Feng's expression of keeping a secret, Chen Hao touched his chin. Hu. Suddenly, the sound of wind sounded. When Chen Hao heard the sound of the wind, he also saw that the black fog, which had originally flowed in a very natural pattern, was suddenly messed up. Chen Hao heard the movement, that was the sound of the giant beast flapping its wings. He raised his head and looked. When he saw it, Chen Hao's eyes condensed slightly. Oh my turtle! I saw a skeleton dragon surrounded by dark mist, flapping its huge bone wings, flying towards this side. Its hollow skull pupils shone with red light. Red was like its pupils, and it was staring at Chen Hao. Roar! It opened its mouth again and roared. Although I don't know how it can fly without flesh and blood, it's really cool. Chen Hao's eyes lit up and there was a smile on his face. Master, do you want it? A childish voice came from his shoulder. That was Xiaoying's voice. Chen Hao looked at Xiaoying. Xiaoying looked at him. Chen Hao smiled and said, of course, I like cool things. Xiaoying nodded slightly. Then, I'll deal with this. Sister Huofeng is too heavy-handed, I'm afraid it will be gone directly. Chen Hao heard it, and he hummed, leave it to you. Xiaoying nodded the rabbit head, then jumped up and jumped from Chen Hao's shoulder. Roar, the bone dragon roared, it suddenly opened its mouth, and spit out black mist from its mouth, and the mist swept towards Chen Hao. The moment the black mist touched the transparent red light shield created by the fire phoenix, which was 10 meters away, the black mist was blocked. It couldn't touch Chen Hao at all. But Chen Hao could see that when the black mist dispersed, it touched the stone beside it. The moment the stone was affected by the black mist, it melted into powder silently. This black mist can turn the material that touches it into ashes directly. It's really powerful. At this time, Xiaoying had already flown out. It changed from a mini bunny to a human form. This is a short-haired girl, wearing a black robe and a tight suit inside. She has 4 black rabbit ears on her head, and under the black bangs are a pair of red eyes. The moment the human-shaped shadow appeared, the figure suddenly disappeared again. When Chen Hao saw the shadow appear again, it had already appeared behind the head of the bone dragon. The shadow stretched out his right hand, and the dark mist condensed into a black blade that was 10 meters long. It waved its hand. The blade slashed downward. The black blade directly passed over the neck under the head of the bone dragon. The bone dragon didn't even have time to make any roars, and the head and body were directly separated. The big head flew down from mid-air. Boom! Accompanied by a loud bang. The head rolled to the ground. The headless body that lost the magic element support of the magic crystal also fell down. Boom! The huge body hit the ground heavily, leaving a long mark, and then stopped. The shadow's figure appeared out of thin air in front of the head of the bone dragon. It waved its hand and the long sword passed over the head of the dragon. A black magic crystal surrounded by black mist flew out from the skull of the bone dragon. It landed in Xiaoying's hand. Xiaoying's body disappeared, and when it reappeared, it was already in front of Chen Hao. Chen Hao was slightly startled. Xiaoying looked at Chen Hao, with no expression on her fair face. She looked at Chen Hao with her red eyes, raised her hand, and a black magic crystal floated in her palm. "Master, magic crystal." Chen Hao came back to his senses, and he smiled, "Your teleportation ability is really elusive." Xiaoying was slightly startled, and she said, "Because it's faster that way." Chen Hao smiled, "Yeah." He stretched out his hand and took the magic crystal. Change. The magic crystal turned into a card and appeared in front of Chen Hao. Half Saint Magic Crystal, Dark Bone Dragon's Magic Crystal, Dark Attribute. Chen Hao stretched his eyebrows. Voila la. Suddenly, a sound came. Hearing this sound, Chen Hao looked at the source of the sound. The skeleton of the headless bone dragon began to collapse without the support of magic. Pieces of bones fell to the ground. The huge skeleton collapsed. Suddenly, Chen Hao was slightly startled. When the skeleton collapsed, a unique creature stood in the pile of skeletons. It was a small bone dragon less than 1 meter tall, made of skeletons. When the small bone dragon saw Chen Hao, it opened its mouth, then, it ran towards Chen Hao. Seeing this, Chen Hao's eyes lit up. "It's you." Chen Hao's interest in this little guy is much greater than his interest in magic crystals. The trapping rope card turned into a rope and rushed towards the small bone dragon. The small bone dragon was tied up like a dumpling by the trapping rope, and its body fell down. It struggled for a while, and then it couldn't move. Suddenly, the small bone dragon and the rope disappeared. In front of Chen Hao, there were 2 more cards. One was the trapping rope, and the other was the card of the small bone dragon. Cub stage small bone dragon. Seeing this, Chen Hao showed a satisfied smile. "I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world." Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 115. Interesting. Chen Hao stretched his eyebrows and looked at the dark area ahead. "Now that I have encountered the semi-holy monsters, if I go inside, I should be able to encounter more advanced monsters." Thinking of this, Chen Hao stretched his eyebrows and continued walking inside. Xiaoying transformed into the form of a rabbit and sat on Chen Hao's shoulder again. After Xiaoying transformed into a rabbit, he was very small and light, even lighter than the jackalope. The reason why it always stood on Chen Hao's shoulders and didn't often take action was because it wanted to protect Chen Hao. Of course, it didn't know that Chen Hao had an immortal body. Chen Hao didn't tell it about it either. After all, it didn't matter to Chen Hao whether he told it or not. Chen Hao is more willing to enjoy the feeling of being protected. Chen Hao continued to move forward. "I don't know what this holy beast of the death abyss will look like." Chen Hao continued walking with them for a while. It was different from what Chen Hao imagined. Chen Hao originally thought that if he continued to move forward, the monsters he encountered would become more powerful. But as you continue to move forward, the monsters you encounter are much weaker. Most of them are in the mature stage, but there are even fewer in the Beast King stage and Awakening stage. But Chen Hao can be sure that the further in, the thicker the black mist nearby becomes. Why is that? Chen Hao's heart moved, he understood, and he stopped. When the fire phoenix saw Chen Hao stop, its eyes glowed with luster and asked doubtfully, "Master, what's wrong?" Chen Hao looked at the black fog around him and said, "There should be a powerful being nearby." The fire phoenix was startled and asked curiously, "Why does the master say that?" Chen Hao said, "After we encountered the semi-holy bone dragon, we have been walking in this direction for about half an hour. But along the way, we did not encounter any monster more powerful than the bone dragon. Obviously the black mist on the side looks denser, but the monsters are actually weaker. I think this will happen. It's probably because we have entered the territory of a powerful monster. The previous stronger monsters have been swallowed by it and become its power. Therefore, what we are doing here is that's why the monsters we encounter are so weak. The fire phoenix's eyes lit up slightly. It looked at Chen Hao with admiration in its eyes. It smiled and said, as expected of the master, "Why didn't I think of that? The master is so smart." Hearing this, Chen Hao looked at Huo Feng. When did this guy learn to flatter him? Chen Hao withdrew his gaze and looked around. The next question is, how do we find the owner of this territory? If I guess correctly, it should be the holy beast we are looking for. It's up to me. After Huo Feng finished speaking, it looked upward. Stretch out your bare hands. A basketball-sized fireball condensed above the palm of the human-shaped fire phoenix. What does it want to do? Chen Hao looked at Huo Feng's actions. I saw Huo Feng raising his hand upward. The fireball spun upward. As the fireball flew upward, it grew larger and larger. From the size of a basketball to the size of a tire. Then, Chen Hao's eyes reflected the firelight. The fireball flying high into the sky was dozens of meters in diameter. And it is still flying upwards and growing. Huo Feng muttered, "It should be almost done." It said, "Explode." Boom. Accompanied by a deafening loud noise. The fireball exploded suddenly, and at the moment of the explosion, a chicken appeared. No, it appeared in the shape of a fire phoenix. The hot breath suddenly rippled out. Chen Hao felt his eyes suddenly light up, and then a scorching wave of air came towards him, followed by a howling wind. The fireball erupted and illuminated everything within a kilometer radius in an instant. The sound produced by the explosion reverberated violently below the abyss. Chen Hao listened to this voice and looked at the dazzling light. He was a little confused. Is this what Huo Feng does? The fire slowly dissipated. The fire phoenix smiled and looked at Chen Hao. "Master, it's done." Chen Hao looked at Huo Feng. Huo Feng crossed his arms and said with a smile, "No matter where the holy beasts are, they can't stand any other holy beasts intruding into their hunting territory. The destructive power used by this magic now is at the level of holy beasts. So that guy will definitely feel the explosion of rich fire magic element. As long as it feels that a holy beast has broken into its territory, it will definitely run like crazy and run here. Then when it sees us, it will scream and kill us." Having said this, the fire phoenix paused and smiled. "I used this trick many times when I was on Wolong Island, and every time those aggressive fools would fall for it." Chen Hao blinked. Is this guy fishing? Shashasha. Suddenly, Chen Hao heard a strange sound. He looked towards the source of the sound, and it was pitch black. But Chen Hao was sure that something was approaching him from that direction. The rustling sound was similar to the sound made by scales rubbing against the ground. Suddenly, Chen Hao saw a creature with the help of firelight. A pitch-black creature emerged from the black mist, revealing its appearance. This guy is half human and half snake, with the upper body of a human and the lower body of a black snake. He has the face of a man, his upper body is covered with black scales and has crisscrossed muscles, while his lower body is directly like a snake's body and tail. The length of this snake's body and tail is close to more than 60 meters. With its human-shaped upper body and the snake's body raised, it looks like it is more than 10 meters above the ground. Chen Hao stretched his eyebrows, raised the life detector in his hand, and pointed the screen at this half-human, half-snake creature as huge as a mountain. Identifying. Authentication completed. Holy period Black Scale Naga. Black Scale Naga, a dark attribute monster, evolved from the black bone python, has a unique magic of petrification. Chen Hao was startled, petrified. Similar to Medusa's petrification? Its scaly male face showed anger, and its snake eyes were staring at the fire phoenix below. It said slowly, "Stupid thing, you dare to break into the saint's territory. It's just a living thing." "I'm getting impatient." The voice was low and hoarse, filled with anger. "It's like a suppressed volcano, as if it's about to explode at any moment." It said, staring at the fire phoenix, "Leave my territory immediately, otherwise, you will die." When Chen Hao heard this, his heart moved. The holy beast in front of him would not directly attack the fire phoenix invading its territory, but would instead send a warning to the fire phoenix to leave. This is somewhat novel. Chen Hao has never seen this situation before. However, the behavior of this holy beast was very reasonable. It is too difficult for a monster to become a holy beast. If the holy beast has reason, it will understand that it is strong enough now and there is no need to risk its life to compete for the magic crystals of other holy beasts. It wants to drive away the fire phoenix and let the fire phoenix leave, so that it can avoid fighting and defend its territory. That is to say. Chen Hao looked at the creature in front of him. This guy has sense. "You want me to leave your territory?" The corners of Fire Phoenix's mouth raised. It crossed its arms and said playfully, "As long as you hand over your magic crystal, I will leave your territory immediately." You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 116. Chen Hao was startled. He looked at the fire phoenix. Why did he feel that the fire phoenix looked like a villain? "You are looking for death." The black scale naga was angry and waved his hand. The dark mist swept down to the fire phoenix from top to bottom. The fire phoenix raised its mouth slightly, child's play. It waved its hand. The red flames rushed over. The dark mist was directly evaporated by the flames. Seeing this, Chen Hao's heart moved. This magic is probably the petrification magic of the black scale naga. It seems to be different from the legendary Medusa's petrification method. How is it possible? How could your flame evaporate my magic? The black scale naga looked shocked and unbelievable. It looked at the fire phoenix and seemed to realize something. "You are a strange beast, the fire phoenix." The black scale naga's face changed drastically, and there was a trace of fear in his eyes. The fire phoenix raised its mouth and said with a smile, "It's too late to know now." As it spoke, it spread its wings behind it and flew high into the sky. It raised its hand, and 3 supergiant fireballs condensed above its palm. The fireball was so big that its diameter was more than 50 meters. The scorching heat filled the air, and the light illuminated the surroundings. No. No, after the black scale naga realized the identity of the fire phoenix, it seemed to understand the difference in strength, and it turned around and fled. Hee, the fire phoenix laughed, ha ha. The fire phoenix's laughter was crazy. Chen Hao's heart beat fast when he heard it. How could this laughter be so much like the arrogant laughter of the villains he heard on TV? The fire phoenix laughed loudly and waved his hand at the same time. 3 supergiant fireballs flew out. The black scale naga looked at the supergiant fireballs coming from behind, and its pupils trembled. No. Boom. Accompanied by loud noises. The fireballs hit it. Ah, a shrill scream sounded. The red fireball exploded, and its body was directly blown apart, and the flames engulfed its body. The black-scaled naga participated and struggled. Chen Hao raised his head and looked at the fire phoenix in the sky. The fire phoenix crossed its chest with its hands, the corners of its mouth were raised, and its phoenix eyes showed a trace of pleasure and enjoyment. Chen Hao blinked his eyes and thought to himself, it seems that this fire phoenix is not just an M, it is also an S. Sadistic. The black-scaled naga was dead. But the fire phoenix's flames were still burning on the black-scaled naga. The fire phoenix stretched its eyebrows and waved its hand. The red flames dissipated. The fire phoenix flapped its wings and flew down from above, and it landed in front of Chen Hao. It looked at Chen Hao, with an expectant smile on its face. "Master, how am I?" Chen Hao looked at the fire phoenix, which had returned to its familiar attitude of asking for credit. He smiled. Huo Feng looked at Chen Hao expectantly, and urged him, "Master, look, I put out the fire this time, and I promise not to burn it to ashes. I did such a good job, praise me, praise me." Chen Hao was happy, and he said with a smile, "Good, great, you are worthy of it." Huo Feng smiled, like a child praised by his parents. "Master," a voice came. Chen Hao came back to his senses, but saw Tu Yi standing next to him, holding a large black magic crystal in his claws. It was the magic crystal of the black scale Naga. Tu Yi said, "Master, I brought the magic crystal over." Hearing this, Chen Hao nodded slightly, stretched out his hand to take the magic crystal, turned the magic crystal into a card, and then touched Tu Yi's little head as a compliment. Tu Yi had a smile on his face and looked very happy. Chen Hao retracted his gaze and looked in the direction of the black scale Naga's body. Without the support of the magic crystal, the scales and flesh on the body of the black scale Naga began to disappear at a speed visible to the naked eye, and then only a white giant snake skeleton was left. The skeleton lost the support of magic and began to collapse. Boom boom. With the collapse of the giant skeleton, dust flew up. At this time, Chen Hao saw that the pile of skeletons that had no sound and life moved. Then Chen Hao saw a small white bone snake running out of the skeleton mountain and quickly ran outside. Seeing the white bone snake, Chen Hao knew that it was the cub of the black scale Naga. He waved his hand, and the animal trap rope card that had been prepared long ago flew out. The card turned into a rope and bound the white bone snake. The rope and the white bone snake disappeared together. There were two more cards in front of Chen Hao. One was naturally a trap rope, and the other, cub stage small bone snake. Seeing this, Chen Hao was slightly startled. "Little bone snake, isn't this thing the cub of the giant python before?" In other words, the cub of the black-scaled Naga is actually a little bone snake. "Well, boring," Chen Hao muttered. Chen Hao already has a little bone snake, he doesn't need so many. However, it's okay to keep it, anyway, the monster doesn't need to consume food, even if it stays in the book, it won't die. "Let's go, let's collect more dark magic crystals today." Chen Hao put away the cards and said to Huo Feng. Huo Feng smiled when he heard it, yet it was in high spirits. Chen Hao looked at Xiaoying and Tu Yi and the others next to him. Tu Yi and the others were looking at Chen Hao, and they also looked very interested. As for Xiaoying, sitting on Chen Hao's shoulder, it looked ahead with a vigilant look. It was not very interested in exploring this place, it was more interested in protecting Chen Hao. Seeing this, Chen Hao smiled and retracted his gaze. "Let's go." Chen Hao continued to wander around with them. With Fire Phoenix, Xiaoying and Tu Yi, they could kill monsters in one move. Chen Hao noticed one thing, there seems to be no monsters in this place. Chen Hao could still encounter some monsters on Wolong Island. Of course, Chen Hao's interest in monsters was not as strong as that of monsters, so he did not collect them when he was on Wolong Island. But there were no monsters in this place, which made Chen Hao feel strange. But after thinking about it, Chen Hao understood. In the Death Abyss, monsters can be reborn infinitely, but monsters cannot. Monsters are dead things, and they can live only with the support of dark magic, while monsters are life plus dark magic. Even if there were monsters here before, they were basically killed by monsters over time. Naturally, there are no monsters. No wonder it is called the Death Abyss. Basically, everything here is transformed from dead things into monsters. Tada! Suddenly, Chen Hao heard a sound. In addition to being dark and cold, this Death Abyss has another characteristic, which is silence. Therefore, as long as there is a creature approaching, the sound will be very loud. This sound should be footsteps. If it's footsteps, is it something like a skeleton warrior? Chen Hao looked at the source of the sound. Looking forward, Chen Hao found that there was actually a fire in the distance. Master, that seems to be a human. Xiao Ying's voice sounded in Chen Hao's ears. Hearing this voice, Chen Hao's heart skipped a beat, and he looked at Xiao Ying. Human. There are humans in this ghost place? Suddenly, Chen Hao's mind flashed through what the god of law had said before. The god of law said that he had visited the demon clan before and also encountered the dark sacred beast on the demon clan side. Since the god of law had encountered the dark sacred beast, it means that the god of law may have been here. Is the guy in front the god of law? I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 117. However, didn't the old man from Dharma God say that he wanted to return to Vav continent? The demons are not in Vav continent. Could it be that after the Dharma God returned to Vav continent, something happened and he ran into the abyss of death again? Chen Hao looked at the fire ahead with doubts. Soon, a creature walked out of the black mist ahead. With the help of the firelight, Chen Hao could clearly see the person coming. Coming out of the black mist was an old man dressed simply. The old man had a resolute face and short, refreshing white hair. He was wearing short sleeves, and his exposed arms had crisscrossed muscles, and you could feel the hard as iron muscles on his body. Holding a black long sword in one hand, he walked out of the black mist. Next to it, followed a monster that was nearly 2 meters tall at the shoulders and looked like a giant wolf. It looked like a giant wolf, but it was a little different. The shoulders on its front body were larger and its muscles were vertical and horizontal, while the back half was smaller. It looks fierce, its whole body is glowing with light fire, and its whole body is covered with golden and red hair. Obviously, the fire that Chen Hao saw just now came from this guy. There is no warcraft in the Death Abyss, which means that this warcraft is the old man's beast. The old man has a pair of sharp eyes, which are as sharp as swords. His eyes fell on Chen Hao, and he frowned. Human. His eyes fell on Xiao Ying on Chen Hao's shoulder, his eyebrows furrowed deeper, and he looked at Huo Feng standing next to Chen Hao. There was a trace of doubt in his eyes, and then he looked at Tu Yi and the others who were following Chen Hao. Shadow Demon Rabbit. The old man's eyebrows slowly unfurled. He withdrew his gaze and looked at Chen Hao. He raised his other hand, stroked his beard, and looked at Chen Hao. Your beast control is very good. It's special, no wonder you're here. As he spoke, the old man retracted his sword-holding hand and put the sword behind his back. When Chen Hao heard this, he smiled. Old sir, what do you call me? The Death Abyss is an extremely dangerous place, and it feels quite novel to meet a human being in this place. This old man obviously has no ill intentions towards him. In this case, Chen Hao is willing to talk to him and understand the identity of this old man. When the old man heard this, there was a hint of confusion in his eyes, and he looked strange. You don't even know me. The old man's words made Chen Hao slightly startled. It seems that this old man is a very famous old man. That's right, a human dares to go here with a beast. A human who can come to the abyss of death is definitely not an ordinary person. Chen Hao smiled. I'm sorry, old gentleman, I'm used to living in seclusion in some uninhabited places, and I don't know much about the outside world. The old man stroked his beard. He squinted his eyes and looked at Chen Hao. He nodded slightly. That's right. Those who can be recognized by the shadow rabbit must be somewhat different from others. The old man said, my name is Taste, and my surname is Ray. Others will call me Sword God out of respect for my strength. Having said this, the old man paused and looked at Chen Hao, who had no change in his expression. He said, you boy, you look young, but you can cultivate the shadow magic rabbit, which shows that you have a high talent for controlling beasts. The place is very dangerous, and I think you are quite pleased with it, so I advise you to leave here as soon as possible. Don't lose your life at such a young age. Sword God. Chen Hao's heart moved. Sword God, Master, I have heard of Sword God. Xiao Ying's voice came. The VAF continent is divided into two poles, the magician is one pole, and the swordsman is the other pole. The reason why these two professions will become the main professions and also become one pole of the VAF continent. It is because among these two professions, there are two people recognized as the strongest in VAF continent. One is the god of law, and the other is the god of swords. Hearing this, Chen Hao nodded slightly. In other words, the guy in front of him has a strength similar to that of the Dharma god. It is no wonder that he dares to come to this abyss of death. However, through the analysis of the sword god's words, it is obvious that the sword god does not know Shuangfeng Yeme, let alone Huofeng. Maybe he can feel the power of Fire Phoenix and Twinkle Night May, but it is impossible for him to believe that a young boy can cultivate a beast master stronger than him, so he may directly learn from Twinkle Night May and Twinkle Flash. Huofeng felt a threatening aura on his body and thought it was his imagination. Chen Hao smiled, "Old sir, I am here and have something to do, so I can't do it directly. But old sir, why are you here? I heard that the Death Abyss is very dangerous, and there are many abyss monsters in it, which are very powerful. It is said that even the Dharma god is afraid of them." Haha, the sword god smiled, "The god of Dharma is afraid, but that doesn't mean I will be afraid." After laughing a few times, the sword god looked at Chen Hao and said with a smile, "Although the abyss monsters here are very powerful, they are not qualified to threaten this sword god." What the sword god meant was that he didn't seem to take those abyss monsters at the level of holy beasts seriously. But Chen Hao knew that the strength of the Dharma god and the sword god should be equal. In other words, the sword god is at most a tie with the holy beast. Therefore, we can understand what the sword god said, that is, although he cannot defeat the abyss monster at the level of a holy beast, he can still run. Chen Hao smiled, "You are indeed a sword god, the old man is so courageous." Haha, after flattering him, the sword god smiled. Chen Hao also smiled, "Old sir, did you come to this abyss of death to hunt the abyss monsters?" When the sword god heard this, he put away his smile, stroked his beard, and said slowly, "Children are ignorant. Abyss monsters are not so easy to hunt." The sword god said, "I came here for a purpose, but what do you want to do? Tell me, I am free now anyway, I can help you, and you can leave here as soon as you are done." Speaking of this, the sword god paused, he looked at Tu Yi and the others, he looked at Chen Hao, "I guess you are planning to hunt some semi-holy magic crystals for these little things, right?" Hearing this, Chen Hao smiled, "Old man has good eyesight." Chen Hao originally wanted to say that he not only wanted semi-holy magic crystals, but also holy beast magic crystals. However, Chen Hao knew that if he said this, the sword god would either not believe it or think he was crazy. So, just follow the old man's words and continue. Haha, the sword god smiled, "In that case, I'll help you. Let's go, I know where there are dark monsters of the semi-saint level. Meeting is fate, I'll help you get a few." Said, the sword god turned around and planned to lead the way outside. Chen Hao followed. Chen Hao has been walking around for a while, and he has only encountered one semi-saint monster. This sword god has obviously been here for a while, he must know where there are semi-saint monsters. It's much more convenient to have him lead the way. By the way, the sword god said while leading the way. He looked at the fire phoenix beside Chen Hao, and then his eyes fell on Chen Hao. "This is the person who said the winged people? The aura of fire demon element on it is very strong. What is its relationship with you? Winged people?" Chen Hao smiled. As expected, the sword god did not see the identity of the fire phoenix. "I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world." Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 118. No wonder he couldn't recognize Huo Feng's identity. After all, Huo Feng was now in human form. When the Fire Phoenix heard the Sword God's question, it looked at Chen Hao. There was expectation in its eyes, and it was also looking forward to Chen Hao's answer. Chen Hao said with a smile, "It is my companion and a fire magician. I am grateful to it along the way." When Huo Feng heard this, he had a smile on his face, but he didn't speak. The Sword God glanced at the 3 pairs of wings behind Huo Feng. He retracted his gaze and stroked his beard. 3 pairs of wings are rare among the winged humans. He looked away and continued to lead the way. Perhaps, the Sword God still has many doubts. But as a Sword God, he naturally has to maintain the image of a knowledgeable and mysterious master in front of juniors. Although he was puzzled, the Sword God had no intention of continuing to ask. If you ask too many questions, the price will be too low. Chen Hao looked at the expressionless and silent posture of the Sword God, and he felt happy in his heart. Chen Hao didn't believe it. The Sword God couldn't feel the aura of power emanating from Huo Feng and Xiaoying. He probably realized something was wrong, but for the sake of his own image, he didn't want to ask more questions. Chen Hao smiled, withdrew his gaze and looked ahead. "Here we come." Suddenly, Tu Yi's voice sounded. From the black mist, a dark skeleton warrior wearing black armor suddenly rushed out and rushed towards Chen Hao. Xiaoying narrowed his eyes. Whoa! Suddenly, a white light flashed. The skeleton king's body was split into 2. The giant flame wolf moved its body and stepped directly on the head of the dark skeleton warrior, and the magic crystal rolled out. The giant wolf opened its mouth, and the flames engulfed the body of the dark skeleton warrior, burning it clean. It walked to the Sword God with the magic crystal in its mouth, and the Sword God stretched out his hand and took it. Change. Magic crystals become cards. The Sword God waved his hand and the card flew towards Chen Hao. Chen Hao was startled, then he stretched out his hand and took it. The Sword God stroked his beard, looked ahead, and said slowly, "This awakening dark element magic crystal is of no use to me, so I will give it to you." With that said, he continued walking forward. But Chen Hao noticed that there was a hint of pride and expectation on the old face of the Sword God. He stroked his beard with his hand and squinted his eyes, as if he was waiting to be praised. Apparently, he thought he looked very handsome just now. Chen Hao also cooperated very well. "Mister, you are really powerful. The dark skeleton warrior is a monster in the awakening stage. The old man can defeat it with just 1 sword. Alas, it's a small thing. A monster in the awakening stage. For me, it's just a matter of a sword." This sigh, in a long tone, conveyed an aura of "I feel great, but I have to pretend." The Sword God's face was full of smiles, and wrinkles could be seen on his resolute face. Chen Hao smiled, "This guy loves to pretend too much. Keep going. I encountered many monsters on the road, but they were all weaklings." The old man guessed that he was too bored staying in the abyss of death. He walked in front, frantically trying to express himself. All the monsters he encountered were taken care of by this old man. Then, in order to show his elegant demeanor, he gave all the magic crystals to Chen Hao. Chen Hao chose to accept all the magic crystals shamelessly. "Boy, do you want to learn sword skills?" suddenly, the old man said. Chen Hao was slightly startled and looked at the old man. I saw the old man looking at Chen Hao with a smile on his face. The Sword God smiled and said, "Old man, I like to travel everywhere. I am used to traveling and I don't like to accept disciples. Those guys in VAF continent sent a lot of gifts and asked me to be my disciple, but none of them agreed. But boy, the more I look at it, the more I like it. It's to my liking. How about it? This kind of good opportunity is rare," Sword God said with a smile. Chen Hao was startled. He didn't expect that the old man would want to accept a disciple just by opening his mouth casually. Chen Hao smiled, I'm very grateful to the old gentleman for taking care of me, but I have a lazy temper and don't have the perseverance to do things. I'd better forget about learning." The sword god was startled and said, "That's such a pity." He was a little surprised, as if he didn't expect Chen Hao to refuse. Suddenly, the sword god seemed to realize something. He frowned and then looked forward. "Here he comes." The sword god held the hilt of the sword in his big hand and looked ahead. In the black mist, a creature appeared in front of Chen Hao. This is a creature as huge as a hill. Its shape is like a wild boar skeleton, except that black muscles and broken black skin can be seen on the wild boar skeleton. It rushed this way like crazy. "Dusty." Chen Hao picked up the biological identification device in his hand and pointed it at the wild boar. Semi-holy period demonized bone pig. Demonized bone pigs, dark attribute monsters, are monsters that are transformed into monsters obtained by absorbing a large amount of dark attribute magic elements from the bones of the Warcraft mad boar. The sword god snorted, "Stupid creature." He stepped on it and rushed forward quickly. "Sword skills, strengthen," the sword god whispered, and as the sword god's voice fell, a white light emerged from the sword god's body. "Sword skills, condense." As the voice of the sword god fell, the sword in the sword god's hand lit up with a dazzling white light. The sword god stepped on the ground. Bang! The sword god jumped up and flew into the air. He faced the wild boar in front of him and shouted, "Sword skills, stretch out." The white light covering the sword in his hand quickly spread out and turned into a white sword light that was 6 meters long. "Go to hell." The sword god suddenly waved the long sword in his hand, and the sword light slashed from top to bottom towards the demonized bone pig. The figure of the demonized bone pig was struck by the sword light, and its huge body was split into two by the sword light in an instant. Boom! The demonized bone pig's body broke into two halves and fell to the ground. The giant flame wolf quickly moved, took out the magic crystal from the corpse of the demonized bone pig, and sent it to the sword god. The white light glowing on the sword god's body dissipated, and he took the magic crystal. Change. The magic crystal turned into a card, and he threw the card away and flew towards Chen Hao. Chen Hao raised his hand and took it. The sword god looked at Chen Hao and said with a smile, "How is it? Are you interested in learning sword skills now?" Chen Hao was startled for a moment, then smiled. "Frankly speaking, he is very handsome, but I met with the god of magic before, and the god of magic gave me a magic book. I haven't learned a few magics yet. It's so tiring to study." The sword god was startled, and he frowned. "God of magic, that bad old man wants to teach you magic too." "Well, I learned a little bit, but I didn't become a disciple," Chen Hao said with a smile. "I just discussed magic." The sword god frowned. "That old man, He said, "Since you don't want to become a disciple, I won't make it difficult for you. Let's do this. I also have a book on sword skills here. You can take it." With that said, he took out a card and handed it to Chen Hao. Chen Hao was slightly startled and took the card. The sword god said, "This card is my lifelong study of sword skills. If the old man from Dharma God gave you a copy, I will give you one too. With it here, I believe you can also learn some sword skills." Suddenly, the sword god seemed to feel something. He looked suddenly in one direction and frowned. "Damn it, is there too much movement?" "Master, it's a dark holy beast." Xiao Ying's voice came to Chen Hao's ears. Chen Hao was slightly startled. He looked at Xiao Ying and then looked at the sword god. The sword god waved the long sword in his hand and stood in front of Chen Hao. "You go, I will stop that guy." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 119. The sword god looked solemn, and it was obvious that he realized that the guy approaching here was difficult to deal with. Chen Hao looked at the solemn expression of the sword god. Chen Hao stretched his eyebrows with a smile on his face and said, "Old sir, leave the next step to me." The sword god was slightly startled. He looked at Chen Hao with a trace of doubt in his eyes. Something came out of the black mist. When Chen Hao took a look, there was a hint of novelty in his eyes. What came out of the black mist was actually a human-shaped black mist. This is a human-shaped black mist, which looks like a black ghost. The upper body of this guy is half human, but the human shape is made up of transparent mist, while the lower body is pure mist. Behind it was a pure black sword. This thing is over 5 meters tall. You can't see its face, but you can see that the eyes on its face are glowing red, and those are its eyes. Chen Hao picked up the life analyzer. Holy period 10,000 years sword soul. The 10,000 years sword soul, a dark attribute monster, was transformed into a monster by absorbing a large amount of dark attribute magic from the giant sword left in the abyss of death. It is immune to physical attacks. How could it be this thing? The sword god's expression changed. Damn it. He looked at Chen Hao with an ugly expression. Run away. The sword god uses sword skills, and his attacks do very little damage to the 10,000 years sword soul, which is immune to physical attacks. This thing can be said to be blood-defying the sword god. No wonder the sword god is so afraid of it. Chen Hao stretched his eyebrows and said, "Fire Phoenix." When the Fire Phoenix heard this, it smiled. "It's my turn." The sword god was startled, and he looked at the Fire Phoenix. I saw the Fire Phoenix flapping its wings and flying into the air. The fire lit up. Hot air waves rippled out, and the surrounding area was enveloped in firelight. When the 10,000 years sword soul took a look, it stretched out its skinny hand made of magic elements, reached for the hilt of the giant sword behind it, and jerked it. It had a black sword in its hand. It moved its body and violently swept away the sword towards the Fire Phoenix in mid-air. "Haha, you are really ignorant," Huofeng laughed excitedly, with a cruel smile on his face. The plain hand was raised and aimed at the sword spirit. The body of the 10,000 years sword soul flew into the air, and its body was suddenly caught in a red ring of fire. The 10,000 years sword soul was startled and looked at the surrounding fire ring. Huofeng shook his hand. The ring of fire suddenly closed. "Ah!" the 10,000 years sword soul screamed like a ghost crying. The crimson fire ring bound its body, and the crimson flame covered its whole body in an instant. The corners of the Fire Phoenix's mouth rose, and it raised its bare hands. A giant fireball with a diameter of more than 30 meters penetrated above it. Huofeng waved his hand. A giant fireball flew out and hit the 10,000 years sword soul. Die! Boom! With a loud noise, the fireball hit the 10,000 years sword soul, which was bound by the ring of fire and could not move. After the fireball hit, it hit the ground with the 10,000 years sword soul pressed against it. Boom! Accompanied by a crack. The fire splashed out and the light came on, illuminating a radius of a kilometer. The body of the 10,000 years sword soul was directly blown away. The scorching flame burned the black mist dispersed by the 10,000 year sword soul. Swallow the mist bit by bit. Chen Hao crossed his chest with his hands, watching this scene, and then looked at the sword god beside him. But he saw the sword god's eyes widened and his mouth enlarged. It looked like his jaw joint was dislocated, and his face was full of surprise. Chen Hao touched his chin and looked at the sword god's expression. He smiled, withdrew his gaze and looked forward. The body of the 10,000 years sword soul was almost burned. Huofeng waved his hand. The flames dissipated. The Fire Phoenix flapped its wings and landed in front of Chen Hao and the sword god. Huofeng glanced at the sword god with his red phoenix eyes, raised the corners of his mouth, showed a contemptuous smile, and then looked at Chen Hao. As soon as he saw Chen Hao, Huofeng's face suddenly became full of expectation. "Master, how am I doing?" Chen Hao smiled, very good, as expected of you. When the Fire Phoenix heard this, he smiled, his face full of joy. Fire Phoenix, alien beast Fire Phoenix, the sword god's voice was trembling and unbelievable. Chen Hao looked at the sword god, only to see the sword god looking at Huo Feng in disbelief. The god of destruction, the strange beast Fire Phoenix, the sword god looked at the Fire Phoenix, how is it possible? Chen Hao looked at the shocked look of the sword god, and Chen Hao smiled, sorry, old gentleman, I didn't mean to lie to you. It's just that I thought you wouldn't believe it if I introduced it at that time, so, I hid it a little bit one time. The sword god was slightly startled. He looked at Chen Hao and then at Huo Feng. He suddenly laughed, it's unbelievable, a strange beast recognizes its owner, it's unheard of, unheard of. He looked at Chen Hao and said with a smile, my little friend is right. If you told me from the beginning, I wouldn't believe it. It's unbelievable, I don't think anyone can believe it unless I see it with my own eyes. Extraordinary beasts grow faster than ordinary beasts, but to become a sacred beast level, it takes at least 1,000 years, this, how it is done is unbelievable, Jian God said and looked at Chen Hao again. Looking at Chen Hao's age, he was puzzled, little friend, tell me honestly, are you really a human being? Chen Hao smiled, don't worry, old man. I can guarantee this. I am a real human being. The sword god nodded slightly, and said, I have heard of a myth that humans descended to the throne of the gods, and all beasts recognized their master. I always thought that it was just a fairy tale made up by a group of incompetent wandering poets to deceive children. It seems that, this myth is real. The sword god smiled, now I have figured out why I felt such a strong presence of fire magic element and dark magic element at the beginning. It turns out that this is the case. Speaking of this, the sword god looked at the little rabbit on Chen Hao's shoulder and said, so, this little guy is not a simple magic beast, right? Chen Hao smiled, it is not a strange beast, it is just the evolution of the shadow magic rabbit in the saint stage, flashing night charm. The sword god's smile froze on his face, and the hand holding his beard also stopped. After a pause of about 3 seconds, the sword god came back to his senses, and he smiled awkwardly, it's just, the evolution of the shadow magic rabbit in the saint stage, haha, a big deal, a big deal. Looking at the sword god's awkward posture, Chen Hao smiled and was about to say something. Clang. Suddenly, there was a sound. Chen Hao heard the sound and looked towards the source of the sound. He saw a misty man made of dark magic element carrying a rusty black giant sword on his back at the place where the Wanyan sword soul died. It was floating and trying to run away. Chen Hao had already prepared the trap rope card. Seeing this little guy, he waved his hand. Transform. The card turned into a rope and flew out, tying the little guy up like a dumpling in an instant. The little guy and the rope disappeared together, and 2 cards appeared in front of Chen Hao. Chen Hao put away the trap rope card, and then picked up the monster card. Cub Stage Newborn Sword Soul. Taming Degree, 0. I am immortal and I raise a divine beast in another world. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 120. A newborn sword soul? The sword spirit I just saw was very large and handsome. Except for being weaker than Huo Feng, he is still very good in other aspects. Just being handsome has already made Chen Hao very attracted. It can be cultivated, but I don't know if this guy will develop another evolutionary path if he continues to cultivate it. It should be possible. Chen Hao withdrew his gaze and put the cards in his book. So, little friend Chen Hao. Suddenly there was a voice. Chen Hao came back to his senses and looked at the speaking sword god. The sword god looked at Chen Hao and saw a solemn expression on his face. Looking at the solemn expression of the sword god, Chen Hao had a hint of doubt in his eyes. What's wrong? The sword god said, didn't you ask me before about why I came here? Now I can tell you the answer to this question. The sword god looked at Chen Hao seriously and said, half a year ago, I felt something strange in the death abyss. The concentration of dark magic elements in the death abyss was higher than it must be more intense than before. In order to investigate the sudden surge in the concentration of dark magic, I chose to enter the abyss of death to investigate. As he spoke, the sword god turned slightly sideways and looked into the dark depths behind him. After half a year of investigation, I have determined the location of the abnormal concentration of magic energy, but the aura inside is too strong. Having said this, the sword god looked back at Chen Hao. The concentration of those magic elements is far beyond that of ordinary abyss monsters. I realized the danger and did not continue to get closer. You asked me just now about the purpose of my coming here. I didn't tell you because I thought it would be useless for you to know. But now it seems that it is useful for you to know. Hearing this, Chen Hao's heart skipped a beat. A glimmer of light flashed across his eyes, and he secretly thought in his mind, the magic essence condensed, could it be an alien egg? During this period, alien beast eggs appeared frequently, and Chen Hao now has 3 alien beast eggs. Could it be said that there is also an alien beast egg condensed in this abyss of death? It's possible. The sword god looked at Chen Hao. Of course, you can make your own choice. If you want to explore, I can take you there, but I think I am no match for that magic element. If you don't want to go, I won't go. Hearing this, Chen Hao smiled and looked at the sword god. Of course I want to go. When the sword god heard this, he looked at the young man in front of him and nodded slightly. In that case, let's go, I will lead the way. Chen Hao hummed. The sword god led the way, and Chen Hao followed. Now that Huo Feng's identity and Xiao Ying's identity have been exposed, there is no need to hide anything. Along the way, if you encounter any magic elements, kill them all and collect them into magic crystals. The 2 men and 7 beasts walked forward. According to Chen Hao's perception of time, it was estimated that it was more than 2 hours in the past. Suddenly, Chen Hao could clearly feel that the black fog around him was getting thicker and thicker. Even the light emitted by the magic light shield released by the fire phoenix cannot easily dissolve the nearby magic elements. Suddenly, the sword god stopped. Chen Hao looked at the sword god and then looked forward. Chen Hao discovered that this was the entrance to a canyon. The entrance to the canyon seemed to be about 5 meters long. From the entrance, rich black magic elements flowed out. These black magic elements overflowed out like flowing water. The sword god looked at Chen Hao. The reason why the magic element is abnormal in the death abyss is inside. Do you want to go? Hearing this, Chen Hao smiled. Of course. Inside, there is most likely an alien egg. Since it is an alien egg, it must not be let go. The sword god looked at Chen Hao's expression and frowned. Chen Hao stepped inside, taking Fire Phoenix and the others with him. What a strong dark magic element aura! Huo Feng frowned and said softly. Hearing this, Chen Hao nodded slightly. Keep going inside. Suddenly, Chen Hao's footsteps stopped. The fireball created by the Fire Phoenix illuminated the surrounding area. And under the light of this fire, Chen Hao saw a stone platform made of weathered stone in the middle of the canyon. On this stone platform, it's a stone statue. This is a female humanoid stone statue. This stone statue is very lifelike. The stone statue is a woman. It has black hair and closed eyes. It is covered with black scales. The scales are like a black skirt, covering its body. From it, dark mist emanated. It seems to be the source of those dark magic elements. It's not an alien egg. There was a hint of doubt in Chen Hao's eyes. Chen Hao originally thought it was an alien egg, but he didn't expect that it was not. This is the statue of the dark goddess. Suddenly, a voice came from the side. Chen Hao was startled and looked to his side. But he found that the sword god who said he would not come in was standing not far behind him. Obviously, This guy followed him for the sake of his own face. The sword god looked at the stone statue in front of him with a face full of surprise, his eyes full of surprise. Chen Hao looked at the sword god, dark goddess. God, this thing Chen Hao often heard during this period, it sounded like the god of control, the god of Dharma, or the god of swords. These names, the god of war, are the boasts of wandering poets, and the god of magic is actually a very powerful magician. Because he has no name to describe it, he is called the god of magic by humans. In fact, he is a more powerful magician. Just a teacher. And the sword god is actually the same. These three are just titles. But now looking at the demeanor of the sword god, it is obvious that this so-called dark goddess statue is probably not a simple title. The sword god nodded slightly and said, "The appearance of the dark goddess is recorded in the history of the demon clan. Legend has it that the demon clan was created by the dark goddess. This dark goddess statue looks very similar to the one drawn in the ancient books on the history of the demon clan. It's similar. It's just, how could there be such a thing in the death abyss? And if it's just a stone statue, how could it be filled with such strong dark magic?" The sword god frowned, his face full of confusion and confusion. Ha ha! Suddenly, a laugh sounded. Laughter echoed in the canyon. Chen Hao was slightly startled and looked at Huo Feng subconsciously. However, Huo Feng's face was full of doubts. Seeing Chen Hao's look, Huo Feng was slightly startled and said, "Master, although this laughter seems to be coming from me, it's really not me this time." Suddenly, the laughter stopped. "It's me." Suddenly, the voice sounded again. Chen Hao looked at the source of the sound. The sound just now was clearly made by the dark goddess statue. Chen Hao looked. I saw the dark goddess statue with closed eyes, and now she opened her eyes, revealing a pair of dark pupils. Its body moved. As soon as it moved, the rocks covering its body fell off one after another. Crash! When the sword god took a look, his face turned pale, his hand clenched the hilt of the sword, and his eyes were fixed on the statue of the dark goddess on the stone platform. After the rock fell off, a figure appeared in front of Chen Hao. Seeing this figure in front of me, Chen Hao was stunned. This is... The dark goddess statue made of stone just now has disappeared, leaving a small pile of stones on the stone platform. And on top of this small pile of rocks, a slender girl, less than 1 meter tall, stood on the rubble with bare feet. The corners of her mouth were raised, staring at Chen Hao and the sword god. "This is, the goddess of darkness." Chen Hao was slightly startled. "Ha ha," the girl laughed, her voice full of pride and arrogance. It laughed and said, "Yes, you two stupid humans, I am the goddess of darkness. 30,000 years ago, the true form of this goddess was destroyed, and it has not been repaired yet. It was not until this period of time that the godhead recovered a little, and then the repair could begin. Unexpectedly, only half a year has passed, and you idiots are here again. Although I haven't regained my full strength yet, it's enough to kill you. 30,000 years. I have almost forgotten what blood tastes like. Let me enjoy the killing." The corners of the dark goddess's mouth raised, and she laughed crazily. The sword god's face turned pale. Huo Feng frowned and looked solemn. Xiao Ying got off Chen Hao's shoulders, transformed into a human form, and stood in front of Chen Hao. The atmosphere became extremely solemn. Chen Hao stretched his eyebrows, picked up the biological identification device, and pointed the screen at the goddess of darkness. Under identification. Authentication completed. Puppy stage Dark Lolita. Dark Lolita, a dark attribute monster, is reshaped by absorbing a large amount of dark magic element from the godhead left by the dark goddess. It possesses the memory, godhead, and divine power of the dark goddess. Although it is in the cub stage, it is stronger than the holy beast. Chen Hao's heart moved and he looked at Dark Lolita. The corners of the Dark Loli's mouth were raised, her eyes were violent, and the raised corners of her mouth revealed small tiger teeth. "You all have to die," Dark Loli laughed excitedly, "ha ha." Suddenly, a rope swept towards the Dark Loli, and in an instant, the Dark Loli was tied into a zongzi. Dark Loli made a sound, and her whole body fell on the stone platform, jumping around on the platform like a maggot. Seeing this scene, Sword God, Huofeng, Xiaoying, and Tuyi all looked at Chen Hao. Suddenly, the Dark Loli and the rope disappeared together. Two cards appeared in front of Chen Hao.